Hi, I'm Holly Overton.
And I'm Dee Dee Fellman, and we're genre masters.
We teach writers how to tell killer stories, whether it's screenwriting, TV writing, or novel writing. We help you craft your genre story.
And we've got a new class coming up. If you want to come and write your script or novel with us, we would love to help you develop it.
Would you like to tell them very quickly just about yourself?
So my background is publishing, worked as senior editor at Top 5 Houses, and now still actively collaborate and write on books, but I'm also a director working on getting my first feature film off the ground.
I am a TV writer. I've worked on shows like Shadowhunters, Tell Me a Story, and most recently, I was a co-executive producer on All American Homecoming on CW and Netflix. And I'm also a published best-selling author. I've written 3 novels, including Baby Doll, my debut, which was an international bestseller. And I love helping writers find their stories. That's what I think is great about writing is like you keep doing it, you keep getting better, and eventually the people who want to read it or watch it will find it. And that's what we love helping writers do.
We're obviously teaching during the writer's strike.
I was going to say we have to acknowledge that there's a level of insecurity, I think, and fear in writers and creatives right now with the strike, with the sudden influx of AI. And I think a lot of writers, both working and those who haven't broken in yet, are questioning, is there a place for us? Will there still be a place? And I think absolutely. I think, in my hopes and dreams, the AI thing becomes what, Bitcoin is to cash. I do believe even if it does take over in certain things, great stories will still survive and we will all find our way to innovate as writers. And so that's why you and I wanted to have these conversations, because we're still reading, we're still watching. Shows like Succession are still dominating the conversations. Exactly. Yeah. So I just don't think a computer is going to do that. And I don't think readers who truly love great books and great stories are going to give up on what we're all creating.
It is easy to get sidetracked, but if you can make craft your kind of lodestar and keep coming back to it, that's what, I think that's what the successful writers always are going to do. And like you said, no AI is going to produce Succession or any of the other awards.
And on that note, like what Dee Dee and I really wanted to do was we wanted to talk about great TV from all over and TV that's made a mark on us. And Dee Dee and I were discussing like, what would we like to talk about? And I think it was you who said, we should watch an old show and, maybe an NYPD Blue or what about the like subway episode from Homicide? And I was like, yes.
I love Homicide. And I also love the fact connecting. So one of the things we do is we connect books to TV and film, and Homicide: Life on the Streets is actually based on the book written by David Simon back when he was a journalist working for the Baltimore Sun. And before he was kind of like the well-known creator of The Wire, and now he was an EP on the show as well. But he learned a lot of his craft on that show. So, I always think like, well, let's go back to some of these episodes that the people we cherish learned on and see what we can pick up from them. And the thing that really struck me about this episode, Holly, just, in kind of like the most general terms, is how current it really felt. Like you kind of think sometimes, oh no, I'm going to go back to these early episodes and it's not going to feel appropriate in 2023. And this felt like, oh my God, yes, we see all these tools and techniques that people still use. So starting with the premise, Holly, this is one thing where I just felt this is so freaking timely in terms of just even the advice we give writers today, in the sense that like I just read last week about a subway incident in New York City and how much this, just even the concept for this episode, the premise of the episode goes to a fear, because we often talk about this especially when you're writing horror and thriller, is you want the fear that you're dealing with in the subject matter to feel relatable, and therefore like, look at what you yourself get afraid of. I am deathly afraid of being pushed onto a subway. So this really, really resonated for me. And I think that's also one of the reasons it really holds up is we still have this fear.
The coolest, and for those of you who haven't seen it, the premise of the episode is Vincent D'Onofrio is, he's a businessman commuting to work. And, at the start of the episode, we kind of see just a very quick montage of him. And then there's this incident on the train. We kind of don't see what happens. And when we come back after the title credit, he's basically been pinned under the train. And you sort of learned that like, he's going to die. Like he is a murder victim. He is the homicide victim of this episode, even though he's currently still alive. And now the cops have to figure out, was this just an accident or was he pushed and this was an intentional? And it's just such a brilliant setup, like for, you don't normally in a cop show get to meet the victim.
Right.
And it's
which is also feels really current because that's something that we feel like, oh, there's been this turn toward like exploring more of the life of the victim. And yet here it is, in 1997, that's exactly what this episode was doing, was kind of twisting, that premise of like just following the detectives after the crime to like literally being on the crime scene. So I thought that was super interesting too.
Yeah, I was funny too. And like, this is kind of an aside. And I was like thinking about it too. There was also this like kind of weird level of like, I thought like misogyny that I wondered if it was just like the way he was treating the female paramedic.
Well, let's back up for a second. Cause I think that gets to like, I don't know if there's anything else we want to say about premise. I guess we can come back to it if we do, but that sort of gets to like part 2, which is the character, which again, I just felt like it was such a contemporary portrait, because even from the very beginning, when we see him going down the subway stairs into the subway, he's jostling someone. It's a very filmic character. And I guess that's part of the attraction to getting Vincent D'Onofrio to play the role, is because he's an anti-hero. He's not like, usually we think of poor victim of whatever crime, and then the detectives have to go and for justice reasons find the criminal, where in this case he could easily have been the criminal because we don't like him.
I know, it was such a brief moment in the montage setup where you're just, everybody's like on the escalator and he's the guy pushing his way through. So it was just, and they did such a great job of like, he wasn't super sympathetic initially, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't, he wasn't a great, like, it wasn't like, you're like, oh my God, you felt sorry for him on a human level, but you're also like, this guy's kind of a jerk. They're trying to like help him here. But by the end, I mean, obviously where we got to, you really do feel for him. Andre Braugher is like just one of my favorite. I mean, he's so brilliant, and this show, but it was a really great like moment for him to show his vulnerability, because he talks about his own experiences like with a healthcare scare that he'd had recently. But what I thought was so interesting was like at the end, like the way that cops have to do, he kind of turns it off, but he's just like, okay, that case is done. And you know what I mean? We're like, there was just a very,
that's what I was gonna say, is I feel like, I mean, and again, it's been a long time since I've read David Simon's book, but I feel like one of the things that comes out when you read these sort of case studies of the cops is, as you say, the kind of inevitability of sometimes people's tragedy, and cops who have to come out. You read sometimes reports where the police don't do enough to help domestic abuse victims, but you also read the reports where like the police go out resigned to the fact that they're not going to be able to stop it, that the woman is going to stay, and like they can't do anything. And I thought the portrayal of that kind of, I'm the person in charge, I'm the person with power, but I'm also helpless in this situation. I mean, Andrew Barr did an amazing job portraying that. But also like, the writing, the setup was there to bring that out of like that unique circumstance of being a policeman in a major city where
and
you like to help, but you also have to reconcile with yourself that you can't always help.
Well, I thought it was like such a great like kind of cop moment where, they send out for reinforcements to have the other cops come and question the witnesses, and the other two homicide detectives show up, and they're like, we need you to go find the girlfriend, she's a jogger running, like, and the one guy's like, like he's complaining about it, and he's like, and Andre Braugher's like, okay, cool, you can go talk to the dead guy, you know what I mean? Like, that's the much harder job, to have to like stay there and question the guy who is gonna die. The guy's like, I like your argument's very persuasive, like, I'll go look for which also gave this like great opportunity. We talk all the time in our classes about theme of like, if you knew it was your time, and what would you do, and how, and it's like, it's this like, there's no real plot that happens. Like, in a very standard procedural, they would have found the girlfriend, and she would have come back, and they would have this like great conversation. But like, it's just this chance to give John Cena and the other cop, whose name I can't remember right now, an opportunity to discuss these like really like important
end
like,
of life issues.
yeah, that in a way that doesn't feel heavy-handed, because it's part of the whole episode.
Well, and I thought that was really interesting. Just going back to character and Andre Braugher's character, and like you say, to the theme of the whole thing of like how he's almost put in the position of being, hospice for this guy. Like, he is the witness to, ultimately his demise, which again, I mean, I guess the advice here in terms of character advice, like I said, is, and I think this has always been such a huge strength of David Simon's that kind of fully flowered during The Wire, which is that he really knew those people. If you really, really dig deep enough to understand your characters, and then you really start to see not just the kind of like big story dilemma that we can construct artificially, but like the finely grained dilemmas of their lives. And in this case, facing someone's death, not being able to do anything about it, facing your own mortality, seeing your own vulnerability and another's vulnerability, not being able to do anything. I mean, I just felt like in every single level, they were capturing that mortality theme and doing it through such a sensitive character who, was generous enough maybe to see the side of a person who was otherwise kind of an asshole. And by the way, there's a documentary that neither of us have seen, but that you should watch, because I think there's probably some really great stuff in there. I want to watch it. The thing about the ending was, apparently it was a big fight with the network and with, the powers that be, because they wanted, of course, the ending you just said. They wanted him to find the girlfriend, reunite the girlfriend and the guy, have the typical procedural, okay, the case is solved, we know who did it, and we get the loved one back. And the writer felt so strongly, like I said, that, Andre Braugher was this kind of in this substitute position of being, not his girlfriend, obviously, but like his last, his priest, his succor, his hospice, whatever, that like, he was like, you absolutely can't reunite the girl and the guy. And yeah, it's kind of like, I don't think it would have been an award-winning episode if they had
because
changed that ending.
It's, it ends with like, the other cop, everybody is leaving, and the girl goes running past the crime scene, where her boyfriend has died, and like it was just, it felt like, because we're talking about mortality and the inevitability and how quickly your life can change and all of that, it was like that last shot of her, like she has no idea her life is about to change. And this, like, it was just so and it was, that, I mean, obviously Homicide: Life on the Streets was award-winning, but it wasn't ER or, one of those shows that like, was like a mega hit, but it was that sort of like craft excellence. Like, it didn't pick the like easy or expected ending. And that's, something that I think TV has become because of the competition, because of the which is something I think all writers have to be thinking about as they're, as they're continuing to grow and develop.
Another point that we've made quite frequently in our classes of like driving toward that ending, like knowing what your ending is, not making your ending necessarily the expected ending, but then also once you have it, being able to drive toward it. And that's why I say, like, you know, I can see from the POV of the writer, like changing the ending changes everything that comes before it, because he drove to that ending, and it's so part of like the pacing, it's part of the theme, it's, you know, it's integral to what it is. So
And
that
I
was,
also think, and something that I also talk about too within, and we both talk about it within character, is the specifics. And he tells this story about the leaf changing, and did you notice like
yeah,
when and it's such a specific story. And at the very end, Andre Brower, asks his partner, like, did you know? And he's like, no. And he's like, yeah, he told me that. And like, you learn something new every day. And it's like, it's just such a great like callback moment.
yeah,
um he learned something, and it's like that's just like one of those moments where maybe that was in it from the beginning. Maybe someone was like, oh, we need more of a specific there, some takeaway that he has. It's
yes.
just so great.
Well, and also the show of the girlfriend without the tell, like they
Yeah.
show her. I was thinking about this just even from a production design costume standpoint, that when you see her in the beginning, she's not just wearing any old sweatsuit. It's got a specific pattern on it. And I
Mm.
think part of that is they knew that, you know, that John Cena and the other detective were going to be going through the park looking at all these women, and you had to immediately know it's not her. and
Yeah.
and even though they were saying like no, wrong hair color, whatever, you still sort of had to have some idea of what she looked like, so that the callback at the end when we see her, they don't tell us that's her
Yeah.
actually,
Yeah.
and you could almost miss it if you weren't paying attention closely. But because they put her in that distinctive tracksuit, because it's fitting everything else about, you know, life
Yeah.
disappearing in the fleeting moment. If you do catch it, it all hits of like, shit, that was her. Shit, she just ran by the crime scene. Like what? So I thought that was really interesting how they played that visually, and it worked. And it was, you know, the perfect callback with the perfect
Yeah.
setup, which again, you're thinking of in your writing. It's not like the director and costume designer come up with this themselves, but they can amplify what you wrote to really make it hit emotionally. So I think the lesson from the Homicide episode is stick to your guns. Like James Yoshimura stuck to his guns. He fought back. He said there's not gonna like have the
I know
girlfriend.
it's true. Although, like when they say we won't publish this novel, then we don't really.
Yes, that's true. If they're saying, if they literally put their foot down, then it's probably better to take the advice. But I think, you know, at least for most of our students, we're meeting people who are early in their careers. And I think my big advice would be take the risk. You
Yeah,
can always
absolutely.
tame it down later if you get that kind of pushback and people don't give you a choice. But at least for your sample or for the thing you initially send out, take the risk,
Yeah.
because the people who get it might actually support you, and that could be, you know, groundbreaking.
We urge you to watch it. Before we go, we wanted to talk about what we're reading, right?
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
obviously,
Who's going first?
well, so I mean, obviously, everybody knows if you want to write, you have to be reading. We say it, but if you don't take our word for it, Stephen King is always talking about it as well. Um, Great writers read. So I'm currently reading. It's called Drowning by T.J. Newman. And her story's great. It's very inspiring. She was a flight attendant who had been an actor and was kind of struggling to find herself. She wrote her first novel, which was called Falling. It was a New York Times bestseller. She adapted the rights in a multi-million-dollar deal. Her second is Drowning, the one that I'm reading now, which also I think it's like a 7-figure deal that she got for the movie rights. And I read Falling and I liked it. I like this one better. I'm almost at the end. I think like character wise, like I'm a character writer. I want a little bit more, but I think on a craft level of how to tell a great thriller and how to keep your reader engaged, she does a phenomenal job. And the premise is this: there is a commercial flight that goes down, and a certain amount of survivors are trapped in the plane underwater. And the only person that can save them is this underwater expert diver, whose daughter and ex-husband happen to be two of the survivors. And so it's really interesting. It kind of goes back and forth between the mother and the father and the survivors in the plane. And I think it's just like it does what we teach, which is like fast paced. There's always a twist. The conditions get worse just when you're like, oh, thank goodness. I don't think I'm going to be surprised when I get to the ending. But I think in a book like this, the way you get there is what is surprising in a thriller like this. And there's definitely been some twists and turns, and it's really entertaining. I mean, it's not, it's a lot more entertaining than I thought. And what is always great when you start to read an author who's growing and becoming like a series off, author who publishes once a year, twice, every couple years, you can see the growth. Like I can see the growth from her as a writer. And so I would definitely recommend. I mean, maybe I'll get to the end and be like, but I definitely enjoyed it, especially if you want to write thrillers. This is not literary fiction. This is a commercial thriller.
Commercial thriller. Okay, got it. Yeah, I read her previous book and enjoyed it from the commercial thriller angle. So I'm going to start with like Jordan Harper's Everybody Knows. I think it's just a terrific mystery thriller LA story. I love these kind of very, very location specific thrillers, and I especially love the sun-drenched LA ones. Highly, highly recommend it. Holly, do you have one to add?
Well, I highly recommend it, and I am friends with Jordan. Jordan and I were classmates in the Warner Brothers Writers Workshop as TV writers starting out, and actually that was a long time ago, and Jordan was talking about wanting to write this book back then, and or do a show version, and Hollywood was like, nobody wants an inside look from somebody who's not really inside, and he got a lot of pushback. And I said that to him when the book came out, how much I enjoyed it, and he's like, I'm really glad I didn't write it then, because I know he's obviously been a very successful TV writer producer as well, and his first book, She Rides Shotgun, is fantastic as well. And or maybe that's his second. He has a short story collection too. And so, but I just thought that this was like so well done. It's definitely been on one of my top lists. I recommend it. I think what Jordan also does really well is just like his descriptions are just so evocative.
Yeah.
And so he brings like kind of this poetic quality to it that I think is just really worth studying.
Yeah.
We want to thank you so much for joining us today. We would love for you to comment on what you're reading and what you're watching. And we'd love for you to visit our website
at www.genre-masters.com. We have a new class coming up on June 14th, and we'd love to help you develop your new project, whether it's a feature, a pilot, or a novel. Also, we will be putting links to all the books and podcasts and the Homicide episode that we've discussed in this YouTube podcast below. We will be doing more of these. So if you have questions or suggestions or anything you want us to address, please also put that in the comments below. And last but certainly not least, we'd like to give a big thank you to our producer, Tony Arias.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.